there's a common denominator of success in sales, and it is this. Successful people learn to make a habit of doing things that unsuccessful people don't like to do. And there's a little secret behind that, and that is that the successful people don't often like to do it either. They just do it anyway.
There's no silver bullet in sales, but on Sales Against the Odds, we're here to give you the best shot at building a sales infrastructure that helps you scale. I'm your host, Lee Brumbaugh. Hello, everyone. This is Sales Against the Odds. Again, I'm your host, Lee Brumbaugh, CEO of Sales Xceleration. Very excited to have Kurt Schneiber joining us today, expert EOS implementer for the last, 11 years. I read in your bio, Kurt, out of 11 years, Houston, Salt Lake City. And I will say before we jump in, I've had the privilege of working with Kurt offsite with him with different companies. And if there's anybody that can get to the heart of how to help you grow your business at EOS Implementer is Kurt. So Kurt, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, that's a very nice introduction. You're probably lathering it on a little bit too thick, but anyway, I'll do my best to help people understand how this all works. And it's good to see you again late.
Yeah. And Kurt, I think a great thing about this, again, another thing on your background, not only an EOS implementer, but for those in the audience, Kurt's been a CEO, sat on boards, been in teams that ran sales teams. So somebody that can really give us a host of information and expertise today. So Kurt, before I jump in, tell us a little bit about how you got down the path of EOS and got started helping businesses grow.
Well, it's interesting. I've run businesses all over the world in different industries, from finance and consumer products and technology and software and payment systems and things. And it's been really fun. And along the way, the last one I was in Minnesota, and it was a financial payments platform technology joint venture between two large companies. And I was the CEO of that joint venture company. It was fun. We had maybe 600 people, 700 people, and about $100 million of business, give or take. I run bigger businesses and smaller businesses. That was that one. And along the way, it wasn't working exactly the way I thought it should work. And one of my colleagues whom I'd hired had tried to be an EOS implementer, but he wasn't quite ready to do that full time. And he said, Kurt, you got to read this book, Traction. And I said, okay, I'll read that. I'm a voracious reader. I read it. Took me about, maybe a week or so. Really quickly, I said, oh my gosh, we should do this. They didn't teach us the basic stuff in MBA school, And I said, okay, so we started on our own for about 3 months, and then we hired an implementer. And everything got better, faster, better people choices, better decisions, faster decisions, clear on who should be in what seat. And the business and the process of running the business got better so fast and so effectively that when that business finally sold, I decided, my wife said, Kurt, you've been taking me all over the world. I mean, we've lived in Egypt and Israel, Saudi Arabia, Greece, India, so she said, my turn to pick. Why, where are we going? She said, we're going to Houston. I said, okay, because our second daughter lives here. She was the first one with kids. I said, okay, we'll go to Houston. I'll figure out something to do. And, it just came as an epiphany that maybe I could do for a couple of years this EOS thing for people, because I like to coach, I like to help. It just feels good, right? And I said, okay, I'll try. And I called my former implementer. He said, nobody's in Houston. There's a few clients there. People travel in. You could start. I said, okay, I'm going to do that. And I started, Lee. And what I found is, well, first off, I pushed my chair out of the way. We're going to talk about sales a little bit today, right? So I pushed my chair to the back of the room in my home office. And I said, I'm not sitting down until I have 20 clients. But what happened is, as I gathered clients and began to use the process that is EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, I found a couple of things. One, that I love the work, and that when we coach business leaders to have a core focus, which is kind of combination of their niche and then their purpose, cause, or passion, I better figure out what mine is. And I figured it out. I writing, thinking, and it was to make a positive, meaningful, and lasting difference in the lives of the people I meet every day. And in this work, I get to do that every day. And I feel at the end of the day, having worked with people, that, doggone it, they're leaving my session room here better for having been here for the day. So that's a little more than how I got here, but it is why I'm still here. So I thought I'd do this for 2 years and then go get a real job. And here I am 11 years later, still doing this work. I don't have to hunt too much anymore because it's mostly referrals, but it's just really a pleasure to be able to be in a room when people are getting a little bit better and not be the person that has to make the change, but the person maybe who sparks the change, that helps use practical tools and disciplines, kind of greasy fingernails things, that somehow as they implement these tools, they get leverage and they move faster, simpler, at a better pace, with more ease than they would have otherwise had I not been with them. And so it's really a blessing, I think, frankly.
Seems like a pretty good compass to have helping people get better, one step at a time. Seems like a good way to guide for the last 11 years. So, and that's what I love about sales acceleration. Same thing when you take a business owner that was on the verge of failing and help them turn around their sales and their strategy. It's that type of impact. That's why we do what we do, right? So I love the passion. You can hear it in your voice. So Kurt, speaking of that passion, talk to me a little bit about, mainly you work with companies in the SMB, small to medium-sized businesses, that space, right? And so when you think about it, what are the biggest, if you could, I know there's a lot out there, but what are the biggest obstacles that you see companies in the SMB space, coming to you with today as you're in these EOS sessions?
Well, it's interesting. I think if you were to think about the EOS world, I think there's 6 key components. One is vision, getting everybody on the same page. One is people, getting the right people in the right seats, the people who hit your values and are good at their jobs. One is data, having good scorecards and measurables for individuals. One is being able to solve issues, the issues component. One is the process component, getting your business sort of almost franchisable. It's so consistent, right? And the last one is attraction, execution, follow through, discipline, having really good priorities, having good meetings, et cetera. And not to go into too much detail there. So you asked, where do people stumble? First, I would say the hardest one at the beginning is the people component, because they've been working with, they've founded a company, they grew the company, people joined them early, the company's gotten bigger, changed, morphed, maybe different segments, and the people they had at the beginning might not really always be the best people to get to the next level. So it's hard to make the emotional choice that's based on analysis. This person is really good person. I love this person. She's really a great person to be with, fits our values, but not that good for the new job, the job that takes us to the next level. But once they get their mind around how to discuss this straight with people, to assess, are they willing to step up and can they step up? And they realize maybe they can't. Then they move on, becomes easier for them because they've made that first decision, the second decision. They realize that over time, not only people down in the machinery of their business, but also in the leadership team sometimes have to change. And once they make those choices and new people are hired who actually fit the culture fully and are really good at the jobs, we say if they get it, they have the capacity to do the work, then things get better. The second gap for people, which is hard, very hard, and that's the process component. That's about deciding that we're going to make our business more predictable by documenting our processes simply, and then training, coaching, measuring, managing people, and updating our process so that over time they become consistent. So think of a Chick-fil-A, where you go to a Chick-fil-A, and I'm not a big fast food guy, but my grandkids like that. You go there, anywhere you go, it's always the same. Food is the same, the people manage the same, the cleanliness is the same. They know how to adjust when things are a little bit busy. They do that the same way. It's awesome, from a consistency perspective. That allows them to franchise, move up, right? Now, you can think, how'd they get there? Well, that's a lot of training, a lot of coaching, a lot of requirements for people who are managers to having done all these different things. So we'll come back to that when we talk about sales, okay? Because that's a hard component and it's a learned skill to make your business predictable like that. And many people have a hard time getting their mind around that. Not that they don't think it's good, because someone could say, well, it'll take all the creativity out. Frankly, I've never really heard that much, because if you get the basics just right, the extraordinary stuff is a little bit easier to manage. And that reminds me of an analogy I use sometimes, which is the best hotel I ever stayed in, Lee, was the Four Seasons Hotel in Mexico City. I know there are better hotels. I haven't stayed in one, right? I've stayed in some good hotels. think it's a Courtyard Hotel. The weather's nice. It's 3 or 4 restaurants, really good. But the guy who founded the Four Seasons hotel chain is Isidore Sharp. He said that you have to systemize the predictable so you can humanize the extraordinary, right? So that's that component of systemizing the basic things is hard for people. And it's a long-term grind, takes work, persistence, etc. So those are the two things that I find most consistently are challenging: the people component and the process component.
So let's take it start with people. I want to get into both of those actually, but focused on sales. Oftentimes, and we've been in these together, Kurt, where you're going in and you're looking at your rocks. We'll get into later what those are. But the person, that sales leader, is not the right person in the seat. Maybe somebody that's been with the organization. How do you get them to identify that maybe that person in that sales seat is not the right person to go from, you said, from 5 to 10 million? They were great at getting you to that first step, but maybe they're not ready for that next level of growth. How do you get them to recognize that?
That's a really good question, as of all your questions probably are. But that question gets to the real root of a challenge that people have when they run their businesses is, does this person really have the skill set to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish together? Now, this is hard because they've experienced this person in one way, but now they're thinking longer term. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years out. Well, I could probably survive with that fellow for next year, but I don't know that he's going to get us to the next place. So then they got to say, what really is required? What do we need? So if you think about a sales leader, so often companies think, if this guy's a great sales guy, I'm going to put him in a management job. He's going to coach and train and et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's a different skill set. I do think that great salespeople can be great managers, but they don't always want to. They want the promotion, they want the status, but they might not want to do the work required to coach 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, 15, 20 people who are out there knocking on doors trying to win business. That's a different skill set. So for example, I have a client here in town. It's in the construction space. I won't go deeper. I don't want you to need to figure out who it is, but they hired a guy, and that guy got him to $100 million of sales. But he had his hand on every single deal. And as they faltered at 100 million, oh my goodness, the pipeline's not growing anymore. Our backlog's sort of stuck. It's actually shrinking as the operations team has caught up, and they're doing better and better, and they're building out all this stuff that got sold last year. Now the backlog's going down. What's happening? And they dug in and realized that this fellow had not built a team of great salespeople. What he'd done is found some people who were brave enough to open the door, and then he would fly in and work his magic, close a deal, and then fly away. And that's not enough. I mean, he was really good, by the way.
Not the next level. Yeah, not the next
level. Not the next level. And they wanted to go $200 million, right? And so that's another $100 million. So they had to let that person go and find someone else to put in that seat. And what became obvious is that the real gap, and this is frequent, right? It's not just that one experience. The real gap is when you have someone who has to step into what we call a leadership, management, and accountability role. We'll abbreviate it, call it LMA, right? And that skill set of coaching, leading, managing, challenging, rewarding, recognizing, encouraging, and sometimes whacking them on the head to get them moving in the right direction is a skill that hasn't been developed while being a hunter. It's different. It's very different.
I went through my first company stop early in my career was Johnson & Johnson. They recognized that early, right? They had a management development program. You go into 3 weeks of New Jersey and they'd have psychiatrists, they put you in a bowl and they're judging you, how you react and all those types of things. It was a really interesting process. But my point around it was the people that you thought were typically on the President's Club that were always hitting their sales numbers were not the people that thrived in that environment. And J&J was early enough to recognize that as that, like you said, we were trying to build great leaders that could manage and elevate people. And that is a different skill set. The other thing that I think is interesting is you went from people to process, right? And that's so much connected as well because that great sales leader helps you build a process. So let's go to the second area. When you think about sales process and the teams you've worked with, Where do they get stuck as far as implementing a repeatable, scalable process? And now have you seen, and you can even say people like me that you've worked with, leaders come in and help them that are really good at that skill set.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm just gonna carve back just a tad first. And that is one of the things that good leaders do in sales is they can assess, is this person a hunter or a farmer? And those are kind of terms that people throw around so easily, maybe too easily sometimes. But if the business has built, let's say, 10 clients that accomplish 80% of their revenue, and they know that they got to keep those clients happy, what happens over time, what will have happened over time, is they've naturally developed a set of people who are really good at farming, who are really going and managing a relationship, keeping it going. But what I've learned that the good sales leader, sales process should uncover this, by the way, is he or she is able to assess that skill set. And those relationship managers are awesome, but hunters are different. That ability to say, I will go and knock on that door. I'm going to get some no's, N-O, right? I'm going to get some no's and I don't care. I'm going to keep going back. I'm going to knock on some new doors. I'm going to go knock down doors, and they revel in the victory and they like the kill, right? So they're hunt and they kill. And maybe that's not the best analogy, but they use those words sometimes. And so first, before the process becomes important, is the simple but difficult assessment and evaluation, clarity. What do I need and what do I have? A person who has the capacity to be a great sales manager might need to be coached by someone like you, Lee, to say, let's look at how we assess these people. They can look at their history. They can also use tools of various sorts, which you probably have in your hip pocket. You pull out this, you pull out that. I've used a couple along the way that helps parse those two different away from each other, right? And that's a really good part of the process is, who do I have? What do I need to accomplish? And which kind of people do I need to have more or less of?
Yeah, and there's lots of great tools out there. You can use predictive index, culture index, there's PXT assessments. I mean, you can now learn, we know from the tools that we have of where they're going to, where they get their energy from, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are. And I'll even go a step further than just hunter farmer. One thing that I've learned through the last few years is you can have somebody that's a hunter, but they're a hunter at somebody that needs to turn and burn a lot of volume. They're really good at hunting that $5,000 deal, but if you put them at closing that $200,000 C-suite deal, totally different ballgame, right? You can be a good hunter for the quick $500 deal, the $50,000 deal, the $5 million deal. And even those individuals are very different.
Can they sell up?
Yep.
Right? Do they have the ability to talk to someone more senior and be able to build that connection and trust that's required? And so when you think about a sales process going the next step on this, this assessment process, right? First, I believe that sales skills are learnable. No one is born a salesperson, and personality is not required. A certain kind of personality is not required. Being super gregarious, a little more introverted, either one of those can be really good salespeople. A great salesperson is understanding that sales is a trust game. It's like a 4-act play, let's put it that way, right? First, you have to trust the person that's in front of you wanting to sell you something. Second, you got to trust her company. Who does she work for? Is that company credible? Third, you got to trust the product or service that person is trying to help me buy. And fourth, you got to trust the deal. And if you go out of that, then you're probably going to miss the deal more than win the deal, right? Because it's confusing to people, right? So a good sales process in a company will help a sales team and individuals thereon learn and understand how to build trust, the interaction, the human connection that's required, learning pace, voice skills, listening skills, being truly a caring person who wants the best for the other side of the table, learning that sales is a grand profession wherein you help people who are struggling with something make decisions that have them be better. If you come to sales that approach, then you're much more likely to build that trust, right? listening well, asking good open-ended questions, and then moving through that. How do I position the company as a trustworthy thing? What do I do? How do I differentiate us from anybody else that's doing that? And a sales process, backing into the process part, a sales process will train people how we, as our company, distinguish ourselves from others. And that process requires that salespeople do it the same way.
And the great thing is so many people think when they're looking at sales process, all right, it's just 5 or 6 steps of what the salesperson takes. But back to your point earlier, this is really a sales process that's tied into the company. The best sales process, you told that story of that rainmaker who was still involved in closing deals. Look, if you've got a CEO that is good at selling where the company is, you know when to insert that CEO to close the deal.
Yes.
I mean, founders should not be like, oh, I've hired a team of 5 people and I'm out of it now. The point is, where do we use the entire company to advance the sales process, to close more deals and bring more value to the customer?
I'll share experience on that. When I became the president of a software business in New York, I came on with, oh, here's a bunch of options. I got into the business and the CFO pulled me aside about 2 months in, said, Kurt, I don't know if we'll make payroll in a couple months. I said, what? How could that be? Oh my gosh. And so I fired the sales head because they weren't making a lot of progress, right? But by then I kind of got my arms around the company and I knew what was going on. And I said, look, I'm the head of sales. I'm the president. I had the front end of the business, right? And they had product people doing other stuff, right? So, okay, let's go. And I told the salespeople, I will never make a commission and I want to write checks for you that are bigger than my compensation. Because the only way I succeed is if you succeed. But if you don't bring me in when you know I can help you get that deal closed and you lose, it's on you, right? So that's a very good point you make. And a good sales trainer, coach, leader, or someone like you, Lee, who comes in from the outside has to recognize, can these people sell up? Is the CEO or someone on the leadership team good at coming in to help accentuate the strengths and get up to the right level to make decisions? So that's a part of the process of building trust in the company, right? And then, of course, trust in the product, trust the deal. And so a good process will help salespeople know how to do that consistently so that we present ourselves well. I think business is like science. If I do it this way, my hypothesis is, then I will get this. If it doesn't work, then I got to go do something else. But if the salespeople aren't doing the experiment the proper way, then I never know what's working and what's not working. So a sales manager, a sales leader has to have consistency in the process. Right now, there are people that when I started EOS, there were 60 or 70 of us who would do this, right? Now there's 875 of us, give or take, almost 900, right? And some of them aren't doing very well. And the reason is not because they can't manage the room when they're with people in the session. They can't sell. They're having a hard time selling. And so when you get them one-on-one, you realize they're not doing some of the things that are required to do to get yourself over the hurdle. So that's number one in the process. Number two, I think, is not number two necessarily, but one of the things that's important in their process is to truly understand your target market. What do they look like? Where are we hunting? When I say look, the demographic qualities, size, industry, all that. Where are we hunting? We only have 5 salespeople. Well, we're national. We're going everywhere. We're global. Oh, you're not global. You only have 5 salespeople. Where is the best place for you to win new business? Oh, Southeast Texas. Maybe over to Florida. Oh, okay. Well, that's where we're going to focus. Can we take an order somewhere else? Well, sure. But don't hunt all over. You'll get too dispersed. You got to stay focused, right? So that's really important. Then the third thing is more difficult. And that is who actually buys the product? Who makes the decision? So what I've learned is to help companies wherein there might be more than one person influencing the decision to develop a heat map. That's what I call it. I made it up. I completely made it up. It might
I've
be
done
real.
that. You have too. I'm with you 100%. Yeah.
Here's in the middle. Who influences the decision? Who's making the decision? Because what we learn is everybody involved in there operates their life from WIFM. WIIFM. What's in it for me? And if you don't understand someone's WIFM who's on the other side of the table, then you can't help them make a decision. Is it keep my boss happy? Is it be a compliance with some rules and regulations? So a good sales process will help uncover the specifics about these people who are actually influencing the purchase.
Most companies don't have the bandwidth to build a high-functioning sales department to allow them to meet their revenue targets. With Sales Xceleration, they don't have to. Our experienced fractional sales leaders consult and implement your sales strategy, infrastructure, management, and team development. Discover how we deploy these proven sales solutions to address your sales challenges by going to our website and filling out the contact form. We'd love to hear from you. Well, that's the key point you made, is these people, because so many times when you talk about influencing the sales process, you focus on the champion. I know Bob, Bob's the guy, Bob said he's making the decision, Bob's going to do it. And what you do is you do a great job of cultivating Bob. You give a proposal that hopefully you do it live with Bob. And then Bob says, great, I'm going to send this over to my CFO and we'll see what happens. And that CFO has not been along the journey. I mean, when you think about it, when you think about the champions you need to develop, there's the approver, which is typically your CEO, your business person, the business driver who sees the field. Oftentimes that's also the CEO, your champion who's probably been spearheading the project, the domino who often comes in late. That could be a board member that you don't even see. They could throw a whole wrinkle in the thing, and that evaluator that could be procurement, CFO. My point is there's typically 4 to 5 people that could influence the deal. And if you're that CEO and you're stuck of saying, well, my sales team keeps coming to me, we don't know why the deal's closing, we don't know why we're trying to expedite it, it's because you haven't surrounded yourself around that entire deal. If you've got 4 to 5 champions or advocated for you, you can get movement. If you're counting on one that's going to push it to other places, then you're lost. Then you're playing with luck, so to speak.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. And that not only works for new deals, but it works for existing clients as well. And all of a sudden you're surprised that you get an RFP over the transom for one of your existing clients for a big piece of business, and you didn't know about it. That's a bad sign. And that means in most cases, not all, but most, your relationship manager has nurtured that relationship with Bob, and Bob loves us, but the decision got taken away from Bob, and it's somewhere up above or on the side or whatever, because Bob hasn't done his job very well. And as a result, they're not happy with him, or Bob's going to get transferred. So he's looking somewhere else because his WIFM is different now. And you didn't know that, right? So that's why I do think now, I don't mean to be prescribing because that's not my intent, but I do think something like a heat map where you know who influences what. And also what happens in those things, if you do it well, then Bob gets transferred to another plant in Louisiana. Bob loves you. Boom. Bob, how's your new job? It's great, but our suppliers are just not very good. Can you come over and see me? Absolutely, we'll come over. So there's the downside risk, and there's also the upside is that you nurture those relationships at different levels. They move if your clients are bigger than you are. Sometimes that happens, right? Then they move to different places and you follow. Or they move to a completely different company and they call you and say, can you come and help me? We're stuck. So that kind of stuff happens. And what I've found, Lee, to go back to the close part of your original question, is that most small to mid-sized business companies don't have a sales process.
Yeah, or it sits on a shelf and gets dusty. It's not interactive. It's not ongoing. It's not engaging with the business.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. We can say we have a sales process, but are we following those steps? Are we implementing? And are those steps actually meaningful for the customer? If the steps are built around what's easiest for you versus what helps that company get what they want to have delivered, it's a totally different ballgame.
It's very true. And so that's the gap on the people component that is a problem or a challenge that way, right? Better word, challenge. Is that, do I have the right person leading the sales team such that we have a process that leads us here, identifies clearly the list of prospects we should be calling on, the list of existing clients we should be totally tight with, and consistently measures that and keeps track of it. Now that leads to one more thought anyway, that most clients don't have a really good CRM or they don't know how to use it. And so I try to encourage them, and I'm not a sales coach, right? So I encourage them, what is your sales process? What does it look like? Can you just do it manually? Hash marks on the wall, names of key deals, Draw a pipeline on your big whiteboard. Everybody look, where are we and how do we get a person to here, from here to here, down to the bottom of the decision-making point? What are the key steps that happen there? Do we know that? Are we measuring those? Are they on a scorecard anywhere? Do we know? And so once they can figure this out manually on a whiteboard or a flip chart or whatever, then they can start to think about, can a CRM help us? Because actually that is a CRM. It happens to be physical, but it is a customer and a prospect relation manager. I managed my business 11 years on Moleskine notebooks. I got, this many of them, right? I'm okay with that because I know all my clients. I know it's important. I don't need a fancy CRM, but if I'm running a big business, I'm having a CRM. And the CRM isn't something that should be penal for the salespeople. It should be a tool. It should be a leverage tool that helps them be better, scheduling their next meetings, making their next phone calls. What are they going to do next? What's the next level? Who do I bring to my next meeting to help me? Who's the influencer? Where are they? What are their numbers? Where are their birthdays? What sports teams do they like? All these things that make little connections, because ultimately what happens when you use that kind of a tool well, Lee, is you build trust. They believe that we care about them. We talk to them in their language. So that's kind of my view. I'm not giving you all kinds of stories. I got a lot of stories. I don't want to waste your time. But you asked me what's hard. That's hard because now we're in the process component. And now let's design the process. Let's at least measure what we do now. Let's train people on how to do it right. Once they start training, they realize, well, that's not very good. We better fix that. So they should be, train them, measure something in the process. Are we making progress or not? Learn when they need to interject themselves to manage somebody when he's off track. And then when he's on your off track, you say, why are you off track? And he says, boss, that process, that's not really good. Well, tell me how it can be better. If we did this, and this, it'd be much better. Now we can assess, is it working or not? So that part of our effort to coach people in the sales world is sometimes hard because they often think it's more touchy-feely. It's more soft around the edges, and you have to be kind of a Zig Ziglar type to be good at this. And I like to strip away the personalities and get to the practicals. What does it take to be a great salesperson? I'll add one thing and then let's just ask the next question. And that is this. I recognize that there's a common denominator of success in sales. And it is this. Successful people learn to make a habit of doing things that unsuccessful people don't like to do. Now, I can't claim that as my own, but I continue to be a proselyting advocate. That's Albert E. N. Gray, 1947, little pamphlet called The Common Denominator of Success. And what he said to follow that up is, and there's a little secret behind that. And that is that the successful people don't often like to do it either. They just do it anyway.
Well, look, it is the simplest things we do nowadays, and especially in today's world. It's like, we'll send an email, I'll send an email and they didn't respond to the email. Sometimes it's just, it's hard to pick up the phone and dial and call and do all the follow-up steps, all those types of things. But if you're the right person and you've got a process that tells you that's the best step to cultivate the relationship, and you log that into what you're doing, again, it's people to process to execution. And that's been our common theme today. And if you do that well, you've got that same hotel that you want to go back to in Mexico City year in and year again.
Absolutely right. Now, I haven't been back to Mexico City very often. I went 3 times.
You're killing the story here. We were good.
But I enjoyed it every time. But it is, by the way, why when I do travel now, I almost always end up in a Marriott property of some sort. They're not the Four Seasons, but they're always predictable and consistent and adequate for what simple me wants to pay for, right? So
this has been great again, sales, the right people with the right process into execution has been a common theme to us today. With your experience in sales, anything that really stands out to you, though, that we haven't hit today, that you want a business owner to walk away and helping their business go to the next level?
Yeah, a couple things. One, a really important thing is to get the right people in the right seats. They got to fit your culture. They got to be really good at their jobs. We call it get it, want it, have capacity, right? And sometimes you might have somebody who you believe has the capacity, but just not quite the experience yet. And so that's when I think of people like you, Lee, to say, hey, look, this person needs a little coaching or your team needs some coaching. let someone come in and help you. I'm here helping you with your business system. You invited me in. Maybe in sales, your whole team would benefit by having someone who's an expert join you for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and elevate your process, assess your people, coach your people, get them focused and become more professionals at what they do, and change the trajectory of your company that way. So that's one thing that I say, well, what else? What else is there? And I think that's really key. And so another thing I would mention is, and maybe it's embodied in a story. And so way back in the day, I used to work for Citigroup, and I was managing a business that was at that time, more than 20 years ago now, was about a $600 million business, right? I had pretty much the whole thing I was managing top to bottom, right? And we had an energy company that was consistently ours. I won't name the name, it's not important. And it was a $20+ million client for us in my product set every year. We had another company, equally consequential in the energy space, $7 million. I said, why? How come? Shouldn't that be a $20 million client? I was new to that business, right? And my European guy and my North American guy said, we should figure this out. And so, surprisingly enough, we went to a meeting in Mexico City. They dragged us out of our hotel into some 2-star, 2.5-star hotel in the basement and negotiated with us to get this next deal. So what I did in that meeting as the head of the business, along with a sales guy or two, and I think there's one lady as well, is I said, wait a minute. Let me see if this hotel has a whiteboard. And I went and got a whiteboard and brought it downstairs and turned around so that we were all facing the whiteboard together. And I'm drawing and writing and making pictures and and they said yes. And we had some stuff to do on our side, and they had some to do on their side, but they said, we want to do business with you. And we won the first deal, which was a Latin America deal. They said, you'll never get North America because this other bank has that. Okay, fine. So then we won Eastern Europe, and then we done a North Africa, and then we won a piece of Europe, regular Western Europe. And then North America came up to bid, and we won that as well. So we took that company in 18 months. Banks don't move this fast. I move fast. We took that to a $20+ million business, and they're still making that money 20 years later. They don't even remember my name, okay? But the guy who I sold to this company just retired, and we've kept in touch maybe once or twice a year. Just, hey, how you doing? He lives in London, right? I said, Darce, congratulations on your retirement. It was a great relationship, blah, blah, blah. We were on the phone. He said, Kurt, I remember that day when you were in the basement with our guys and you pulled out that whiteboard and we started doing stuff together. And it just changed the nature of our relationship, that you were just so greasy fingernails, practical, not bankerly with your tie all on and all that stuff, And so what I say, what's the principle? You have to understand how people make decisions, and don't get wrapped up in yourself. Get wrapped up in the mentality of the person on the other side of the table. Really care about them. Try to align your WIFM with their WIFM so that you totally understand what they need and want, and it aligns with you. And if you can do that, what happens is the trust goes up. It just magnifies the likelihood of you to win a deal. So if I would have that thing to add, it is not the story itself. It is understand the nature of what it's like to truly care about the person on the other side of the table, such that you want the best for him. And that hopefully matches up with you. And if it's not the best for him, don't do it. So when I'm selling now, this is my last thing, then I'll let you go. When I'm selling what I do, we're in a 90-minute meeting. In the last 7 minutes, I just kind of show how it works in the process. By the way, that's a good thing to have in your sales process. It's a proven process, right? How is this going to work when we work together? When I get to a point in there, I tell them my price. My price is a little bit high. It's higher than anybody else in Houston. And I look at them and I say, well, it's guaranteed. If you don't like it, don't pay me. And also, you know what? If you don't like my cologne, but you like EOS, I have other people that have better cologne than me. I'll be happy to introduce you. Almost always when they realize that I'm not desperate, they say, no, we want you. So that's fine. Okay. So don't be desperate. Desperation smells pretty bad.
Yeah. Well, Kurt, I love what you're saying. You're keeping the customer first. You're relating on their terms. What's in it for them? What's in it for you together? And it's a partnership. So This has been great today. I know that we got into obviously sales process, salespeople, but really tangible ways to sell. So if you are even that sole entrepreneur out there who's also consulting, hopefully there's some valuable takeaways that you're going to have with us. So again, this has been Sales Against the Odds. Kurt, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be with you, Lee. See you soon. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Sales Against the Odds. Be sure to hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. And if you want more resources on scaling sales, check out our website at salesxceleration.com.